Hello. We're going to start in 30 seconds. Okay. Espero entonces. Sí. Por eso te decía, me das tú, o sea, espero que no. Consigue. Ya, okay. ¿Listo? Okay. Hello and welcome to the first talk in the of 2024 of this Elisava Master's Talk series. I would like to introduce myself. I'm Andres Colmenares. I am the director of the Master in Design for Responsible AI at Elisava. And I'm very honored today to introduce our very special guest for this talk. But before introducing him, I want to invite you just for a few seconds to close your eyes and try to relax a bit and think of that place that you feel home, that you call home. Think of how it looks, the people, the non-humans, the smells, the colors. Now you can open your eyes. Today we have a very special person and also dear friend who will talk us about the new home and reflect about the idea of home. His name, Kaave Pour. He was the co-founder and CEO and creative director of the well-known design and research lab Space 10 that a few months ago announced its closure. And Kaave is here today to give his first public talk after that announcement to share, what's in front of his journey. So I invite you to give a very warm applause to Kaave Pour.
Okay, no pressure. By the way, I think there's a few more extra seats down here if some of you on the stairs are still needing them. But first of all, thank you so much for having me. For the next 60 minutes, we're going to talk about home, which is a quite personal matter and also very subjective. So I thought before we talk about that in detail, I would introduce myself a little bit more than what I usually do. I'm half Danish, half Iranian. And my name is Kaave. Nobody really knows how to pronounce it. If you don't either, don't worry. It's been the story of my life and a great icebreaker. For me, home is mostly where these two lovely people are. It's my daughter and my wife. And I think some of you know the feeling that sometimes home can just be where you are with the ones you hold dearest. Besides that, I also see home being my city of Copenhagen. But I also spend almost half, at least 1/3 of my time in nature and in a forest in Sweden where me and a bunch of friends have a beautiful space. So I think home has been something I've been tinkering with for a long time, and I'm really excited to talk a bit more about it today. But I guess some of you maybe also want to know a little bit about what I've been doing, so you kind of know I'm not just talking bullshit here. And for the last 10 years, I've been trying to be the co-founder and the CEO and the creative director of the research and design lab Space 10. And you could say our role was really to try to understand the future of the everyday life. And we did that through like playful research and explorations. We did it through community events and exhibitions and festivals all over the world. And we did it through pilots and solutions. And we did it until September last year, where we chose that sometimes being able to decide when you start and stop playing is a very, very unique opportunity. And we took that opportunity. I'm not going to bore you to death about why and how. We can maybe talk about that later. But if you still don't know who Space 10 is and what we did, maybe you know our founding partner in crime, IKEA, small furniture company from Sweden. And obviously IKEA is likely one of the largest design companies in the world, and they have a very distinct way of looking at design that is really polarizing also the design world. Some people call it junk and mass consumption, and others, they love that suddenly there is an alternative to the very luxury and high-end driven design world where very few people have the means to actually buy what is in some worlds good design. And we started working with them, and in particular the CEO, because I think the CEO felt like many others that the world outside IKEA was moving a lot faster than the world inside of IKEA. And how do you change your way of operating a business in this world of change? Many, they go towards design thinking and post-it notes and workshops. And we talked about maybe we could find a new way to create a space for new ideas that are not just the traditional temporary intention of trying to solve something and then afterwards going back to your full-time job. And most companies, they say they want to do innovation, but they want to have you work 100% of the time on business, and then 20% on top of that, you can maybe be a little innovative on the side. And obviously, that doesn't really work. So we created a space, started in Copenhagen. It was a space for new ideas, and where a lot of exciting projects with a lot of exciting partners, including some partners who are here in the room today, have been part of that journey. But today is not about Space 10, and I love these keynote animations. Like it's just one more time. It's so good. So Space 10 is basically dead, but obviously, hopefully, the spirit of Space 10 and a lot of the insights I can still take with me into my next adventure. And a lot of people have been asking, so what's next? And in all honesty, I don't really know the details, but I know that the co-founder of Pixar, he once said that the future is not a destination, it's a direction. And that really hit home with me, that sometimes you don't necessarily know where to go, but you know the direction that you want to move in. And for me, I want to share some of that with you today. A disclaimer, this is the first time I'm doing this presentation, and it is basically just a peek inside my brain today. It's not something at all close to be master's material, so don't quote me in your research paper or in your final exam. Double-check things, do your own research. Hopefully today is just about me sparking some ideas and some insights and some things I'm curious about, and maybe some of that will be of value to you too. So the way I like to work is to kind of get a little bit of a sense of what I believe in the bigger picture, and hopefully that can be the tracks that I can start laying for where I want to go. And if we zoom out, obviously the world is it's a crazy place in general. I think it's both wonderful and it's complicated. And you know, there are now more of us than ever before. 8 billion humans. 8 billion hopes for a better home and a more fulfilling everyday life. And I think that despite its struggles and despite all the disasters and the wars and the challenges and the frustrations we have, I think if we look historically, I still maybe naively and optimistically believe that the world is better than what it was before. But progress also brings a whole lot of challenges. We have a climate crisis that is getting bigger every single day, every single minute. We have technology moving in every single corner of our world. I don't know, maybe a quick hand. How many can recognize this picture from your own life? And the ones who are not putting a hand up, you're likely looking at your phone right now. So obviously technology is a beautiful thing in many ways, but I also think as a designer, maybe we haven't done our job good enough yet on how technology can be integrated into our lives in a better way. And then we're also seeing that there is a rising inequality in the world, and in particular younger generations and certain parts of the world are just fed up with the systems of yesterday, the systems of how certain people get everything and the rest kind of like is being left behind over and over and over again. And we're seeing now, in particular because of technology, that a lot of new voices are being heard in different ways than maybe our parents and our grandparents have been used to in the past, at least in scale. So this whole thing about everything is fine, I think it's not really something that is acceptable if we are sitting in this room, if we are fortunate enough to be at a beautiful design museum and going at an amazing master's program or work in the design industry. We have a privilege and also a responsibility to use design for good. So if we should sum up, like I think as a designer, sometimes it can help find out which curves you want to bend. And for me, I think in particular the climate crisis, the mental health crisis, and the inequality gap are definitely bigger movements that would be great for not just one person, but for general movements to see whether we can bend in our small actions, and hopefully as a larger group and a larger community, these things can actually make a bigger change. That's a lot, huh? So where do you start? I don't know with you, but I feel like I'm this little fellow at the moment, like so many things you want to do, so many things people say you should do, and how do you take that first step? What is the direction you want to go in? Just want to do a quick check on time. Can I see it here? Maybe you can help me keep track of it. What I am obsessed about is home. I have been thinking about home, working with home, both at Space 10, but also before Space 10, and I just love the home in so many ways. So I think home is a great canvas and a context for a lot of these major challenges. It makes it personal. It makes it a little bit more concrete. But it still is like this canvas that has so many opportunities for a designer to work within without getting bored. Meaning of home obviously can be quite different for people. And again, this is just a quick starting point for me in terms of how I see home. But I tend to see home in these like 3 buckets. And you might disagree with these buckets, but for me, there's like the functional home, which is basically the physical shelter of you being safe and secure, and where you have your general amenities to sleep or drink and eat. But you're also seeing that the emotional state of home is becoming increasingly important, the feeling of home. Many people in our research in the past have said that home is for them more like a group of friends they can be with, or a group of family members that they actually see themselves in. It's a place where you can be oneself. That's also why we see in particular many young people, teenagers in particular, saying that home for them is Fortnite or it's Discord. It's places where they feel they can express themselves with people they trust. It's not necessarily a bed and a glass of water. And then you have the cultural home, which is for many not necessarily where they are right now, but where they belong to, where they come from. This is something that is in particular big in our studies when we worked in East Asia, where a lot of people, they saw home as the region they came from, where their families still were, but not necessarily in their apartment in the big city they potentially worked at for a certain given time. So if we should speed up a little bit more, I think it's clear that it's really, really impossible to overstate the importance of home. We also see that home is really the center of our everyday life, and it has a massive influence on our well-being. Some numbers show, and obviously it depends on where in the world we look, but it's up to 50 to 70% of people's time spent that is connected to time at home. And that is significant. People say we spend a lot of time on our phones, but we spend more time at home. And that is something I feel is a great opportunity to look upon. Then besides that, home is such a central node in the global economy, but it's never really spoken in that language. We see that there is, according to at least the World Bank, between 2 to 2.5 billion households in the world. Obviously, defining that is a bit difficult, but it's around that size, and some estimates say that we potentially need more than 2 billion new homes by 2050 because of both migration and more people moving and new homes and old homes needing to be refurnished. And around 75% of income spent is in some way or another related to the home. Some of the biggest costs and the biggest barriers for in particular people with low income is cost associated to home, not just the mortgage, but the insurance and the food, the amenities that you use at home. And this is something that I don't think you see in any other industry as a designer, an area and a platform for potential change. And besides that, home is a major opportunity in terms of combating the climate crisis. And I'm not just talking about the construction industry, which in itself is a major issue, but also all the things that comes in and out of the home, whether it's energy and whether it's waste, then home is a really, really important player in this industry. So if that wasn't enough, I think we have in particular seen as an acceleration from the pandemic that the home as a role also changed. So a lot of things have moved into the home for some, whether it's education or exercise and activity, but we're also seeing other things moving out of the home simply because of lack of space. So certain things are moving into your neighborhood, certain things are moving online, and we're seeing really that the whole perception and the flux of home is changing. So sometimes, at least in my 10 years at Space 10, it feels like innovation can sometimes just be theater. It's like there's these futurists who predicts the future and everything's going to be radical change. And let's face it, we look around and nothing has really changed, right? Like we still go to the toilet and we still sleep and we still eat and we still like to find somebody we like and have fun and maybe drink a glass of wine. That has been like that forever. So sometimes I think we can look at radical change as more radical than what it actually is. But if we zoom out in a larger time zone, it can help us understand that that is not always true. Actually, sometimes there is radical change. It can just be extremely hard to identify and see when you're part of the equation. This is, again, a work in progress slide, so it's just for my own sense-making. But if we look at the history of home, obviously the first types of homes were the shelters, like the nature homes, which were super primitive and not at all close to what we would associate with a home today. And then obviously agriculture in particular changed the notion of home, and we became rooted communities, and the function of a home, the typology of a home, even the design of a home changed quite dramatically. And then obviously ancient civilizations across the world, they really changed dramatically how we designed home, and it became, a cultural phenomenon, and it was also an aesthetic decision, certainly how you designed a home, because it was a signal of power or of culture or of manifestation. And then obviously over time we have had all these periods. Now I didn't bring the Renaissance, you could have so many different buckets of homes in this, all the way up to the industrial home and the whole suburban living and the car and the whole maze of that. And I guess now in this time, even though there's hundreds of typologies of home, I think in the history books in 100 years from now, we'll probably look at urbanization as the key word for what defined home and how we designed and lived at home in this day and age. And obviously, we are not going to stay in this day and age forever. So I'm just really curious around what is that next phase of home, and what will change the way we design these homes, and can we as designers influence? Because I've met a lot of people in the real estate industry, And shit, I don't hope they're going to decide how we're going to live in the future. Because they are not designers, and they have like a very strict bottom line, and they have maybe not always either the best sense of aesthetic and form and function. You have seen some of those homes. It's not how most people would like to live. So for me, the new home is something that we can look at in two folds. One of them is the system of home, so not seeing a home as an isolated unit, but seeing the home as a connected unit, whether it's connected to the city, to the neighborhood, to the apartment block. But obviously, one home alone doesn't really make any difference, but the development of multiple homes together is something we will see a lot. Not just the homes itself, but also the systems that fulfill and support those homes. How do you get energy to those homes? How do you transport things in and out of those homes? How do you get to school safely to those homes? So the systems that connect these new homes will be extremely important. Then on the other side, the layers of a home will also be where I think a lot of new innovation will happen. Most people, when they talk about the new home, they look at the base layer. They look at the structure and the foundation and the construction of a home, and a lot of design and a lot of money goes into that. But when we start to unbundle what actually makes a home, at least from a functional point of view, we have furniture, we have the kitchens, we have the bathrooms, but then we have now also a bunch of connectivity and data and smartness and interfaces. We have utilities like water, electricity, energy, that suddenly starts to become an extremely important factor in where we build those homes and how we use those homes, how much they cost. And then also all of the activities that makes a home, the services, whether it's how you get the food in and out. For some people, if you get older, how do you make sure you can stay in that home and be taken care of? So what we have seen with Space 10 is like there's a whole wave of new companies, small startups, bigger industries that are starting to try to kind of eat up the chain of home and start to understand how they can take over multiple of these layers. And from a financial point of view, this is extremely smart because it's really, really difficult to lower the price of housing by only looking at the bottom layer. And one of the biggest issues in the world right now is housing cost. But if you can start understanding how to potentially reduce the cost of some of the other layers, you will also be able to, in total, start to reduce the total cost of living at home. And obviously, this is not class of financials and economics, but obviously design and money is extremely important if you want to make something that people can actually use and not just look upon on YouTube. And one of the big reasons for this whole shift is also surprise, technology. The whole hype of technology is not a hype anymore, it's a reality, and we are seeing that technology is not just something for the few, it's for the many. The technology companies are now not just the biggest technology companies in the world, it's the biggest companies in the world. And obviously the way they move and the way they act, I met someone who said, like, if a big technology company farts, the whole world smells it. And obviously this is something we need to adapt to and address and utilize. But how to do that can be quite difficult because the tech cycles, they move so fast. There's so many hypes all the time. The way we tend to look at it is by using a quite simple model that is being used in many other companies across the world. It's called an S-curve, and it's kind of like a way for you to see where things are moving and what takes over. So a simple way to say it is technology often starts with this very simple idea. It often starts at academia or research studio, often also starts at the military, and this is the place where these crazy ideas are being invented. So it's like real IP, real invention, things never seen before. Starts to move into something like, okay, maybe this technology can actually do something. We don't really know what. There's a lot of experimentation. A lot of the innovation still happens at the actual technology stage. But then at some point, this technology starts to become large and scalable, and the innovation moves away from the hardware to the software, or at least the layers on top of the technology. If we use the iPhone as an example, in the beginning, all the innovation and all the one big thing were around the new camera, or the new screen, or the new form factor. And now when you see Apple present a new phone, there's not really a lot of new things anymore. But a lot of the innovation now has moved away from technology and hardware and into all the applications that people are building on top of these new technology platforms. So now the new innovation is on the mobility app that is changing the way people move around in the city. It's moving away into Tinder and how people, they find each other and start to date. It's how we move it into Snapchat or TikTok and the way we consume information. So innovation is not on the iPhone anymore, it's on the applications that are being built on top of it. And if we should try to put that in a context, obviously desktop computing were a big thing. It's still a big thing. These S-curves doesn't mean that when the next comes, then the other one disappears. It just gets a less important role in society. So with desktop computing, it didn't change a lot for homes to keep it in that context. It basically just meant that maybe you would have a desk at home, or you suddenly started to be in your couch a bit more because you could work from multiple places, but it was quite subtle. Then obviously mobile computing, in 2007 the new iPhone came, and now there's billions of phones across the world, and I think it's an understatement to say it's really turned around how every single industry has changed and operates, at least the ones who are facing people and customers. And mobile computing obviously are now starting to show signs of where it's moving next. So it's not just the phones anymore. Mobile computing is also like being mobile with your watch or with your AirPods or other types of devices. But at some point, we will not buy an iPhone 42. You know, like at some point, you know, we move on to something new because we get better at designing things that make sense for where we are. And these new innovations like AirPods and watches, they have a new spatial component. They can understand the space around you a lot better, and it makes you operate in a very different way than what you have been used to with your phone before. And this is a new paradigm I think will be very, very significant beyond the home, but in particular for the home. And this is the era of what many call the era of spatial computing. And spatial computing basically means that everything that has been in this little brick in our pocket suddenly will start to be expanded into the spaces around us. Not necessarily with glasses, it can also be with more tactile technology that is sitting in an air purifier or in a sensor or in a solar panel energy grid, but like the technology will move into the space around us in a very, very different way than it has been before. I guess this is nothing new for you, and this is not necessarily because everyone is super excited about this, but this is happening and will happen, and it will happen quite big. And obviously the merge of the physical and the digital in this new era is super relevant for the home. So what does it mean? What if you ask Google? This is what comes up if you ask Google the future of the home. What do you think? It looks like the same designer as the ones who often design car company shows. I mean, this is super depressing, right? So this is a big issue I see a lot of times with the future of design. The ones imagining the future often end up shaping it, but the ones imagining the future, and no bad words about them, because they should also be allowed to imagine the future, but it's just not enough to have only one type of imagination, which is these like glass houses where people live forever in these like super sterile masculine environments that I think nobody really feels connected to. But then people would say, yeah, but Google is old. Let's ask ChatGPT. So I asked ChatGPT, show me a picture of the future of home, and it was even worse. I mean, holy cow, this is really not how I want to live my future life at home. So luckily with ChatGPT, you can kind of have a conversation, so I wrote, I hate it. Could it be more soft, intimate, playful, and maybe less masculine? Glass house, Silicon Valley vibe, please. And then it came with another house. Here's a revised image of the future home. And obviously, this is not necessarily a viable solution, but I think it's a good example of how if you just tweak a little bit your imagination, you get something very different. And this is your responsibility to do that. Because you might not be the ones who build all of you those billion-scale platforms, But as designers, the work you put out and the things you imagine, they shape perception of what's possible, and they change the whole picture of where everyone else is moving towards. So it's a huge responsibility to be a designer just in the whole space of imagination, not even in execution. And I think this is something that I am really passionate about, and something Space 10 has worked on for a long time. Is like, how can we bridge the gap of imagination and reality to something a bit more desirable? And how can we open up that process so more people are allowed to imagine how we should live tomorrow? And advice is also, don't go too far out in the future, because sometimes you can imagine things, and then, when you want to do it, you don't really hit home, right? Because you start to imagine things in like 1,000 years from now, and obviously that is impossible. It can be a great tool for discussion and for discourse, and we have done it a lot, in particular with Andreas and I am, but like as a designer sometimes you also need to have like a closer sense of what is possible if you also want to have a sense of where these things could go in reality. And that is a little bit where my head is at the moment. And then, how am I with time? I'm doing well. You don't know how many slides I have left? Perfect. How are you doing? It's like already longer than what most people scientifically can last to hear. Do we need a little shake? Okay. So I thought that besides the more abstract thinking of the home, I would bring some things that I've seen that I find interesting in terms of more specific domains that will likely change based on some startups that we have worked with or seen, or some bigger launches and products we've seen. They are not necessarily all like things I really get excited about from a functional or aesthetic point of view, but I hope that maybe some of these ideas can trigger some things that you will take with you. And some of the things it's fairly short, but there are like 6 domains that I have brought with me today. I could have brought one. I could also have brought 20. Now I don't know why I ended with 6. It just happened. The first one is energy. And again, these are not facts, these are estimates or speculations. They are from some well-renowned sources. I don't know if Bloomberg actually is that, but it's at least interesting. One of them is like by 2035, 50% of homes could be energy autonomous using solar panels and advanced battery storage to both consume and contribute to the grid. This is something we have worked with a lot at Space 10. We even opened the whole satellite office in India for quite a while just to explore this topic. And in particular in New Delhi, they have like some of the smartest people in the world when it comes to, in particular, solar energy and grid technology. And we did a lot of work within that space, not just like more creative artistic projects, but also a lot of projects that are unfortunately still a bit under NDA. But some of the things that are changing in terms of energy in the home is obviously the climate crisis. Like the way we get energy is just not really good. So how can we change that for the better? But there is also a whole new element of energy, which is the politics of energy. My wife, she works at Ørsted Energy, one of the largest renewable energy companies in the world, and like they are definitely busy right now with navigating this whole space of energy, because energy is now also national security policy. It's like where you get your energy from. It's not just a climate policy, it's like a defense policy. So suddenly, the way you get energy, the way you make sure your households within your country actually can sustain itself is by making sure your energy comes from the right places and the right regions or the right countries. And this is something that obviously many, many countries would like to be distant and independent from. So you're seeing billions of euros, in particular in the EU, being put into all types of investment when it comes to reinventing the energy grid into something that is closer to home and less dependent on foreign regions. And then the third one is affordability. Energy is really, really expensive, and it's a really big barrier for people. Besides that, there's like at least according to the UN, almost 1 billion households across the world who doesn't have any or very little access to electricity today. And in many places, like just the reliability of the grid, in particular at peak hours, are really difficult. So if you have a family at home in certain countries, and then the electricity just cuts, you can't study, you can't cook, you can't be with yourself. If you live alone, you can't feel safe. So like energy is very, very important for how we live at home. And right now you're seeing small signs of something I think will be a mass area of design and technology within the next 10, 15 years, which is how homes will become not just a place where you consume energy, but where you obviously will produce energy. And energy will not be a source of cost, but a source of revenue. You'll start to earn money on your energy, and that will make a big difference when it comes to affordability and cost. So we're seeing a lot of new companies, not just Tesla, moving into battery storage, but we're also seeing that surfaces are now becoming places where you can harvest energy. It's not just on your roof anymore. We do solar as an interesting startup from Berlin. They're doing solar panels for balconies, so you can suddenly start to harvest balcony here. But the latest startups we have been visiting, some of the labs, they're doing transparent solar panels, so it means like the panels that you can see through. So suddenly every company like Velux and others who makes windows, they will obviously have an opportunity to integrate solar panels into glass facades. So imagine in urban areas with sky rises where the whole tower is just harvesting energy from the sun. And there's also more artistic moves. Marianne, which is a great artist and designer from Holland, she's made Sonne, which is a lamp, but it's directly covered with panels on one side, so it's a lamp that you can have in your cabin or your summer house if you don't have electricity, or you can have it at home and just make a statement. But it means that like a lot of the products, in particular appliances, will be designed differently. But when you also move to this type of energy, you also see as an industrial designer that you will see a lot more batteries integrated likely into the appliance itself. So a ceiling fan, for example, is one of the most popular products in India. And you will likely see that they will be inbuilt with a battery, so they will charge itself. And then when there is a power cut, which happens daily, it will at least have 6 hours of duration to power your home while this is happening. So the appliances, they become independent of whether there is energy or not. And this is something that is really, really interesting in terms of appliances like fridge, freezers, lights, and so on, that you will design. Even the engineering inside the product will be designed differently just because we can harvest energy from the sun. So very, very interesting space. And if you're doing a startup within the home and technology, I think this space is an area where you can raise a lot of money and do good at the same time. And we will see some exciting new waves coming when it comes to energy. The last part I want to say here is obviously that it will hopefully also change the way we then live at home in a very different way. So if you look back historically, when we didn't have this excess of energy in Europe within our households, the way we cooked, the air quality at home from the different appliances that were not as clean in terms of cooking as today, changed the amount of years we lived. It changed the way we looked, the way we had an ability to study. And that is obviously something we don't know what will happen as a ripple effect of this next movement of energy. But I think it's going to be very, very exciting. The second area that will change with home is how we design food systems around home. So by 2035, 20% of urban homes could lack traditional kitchens, leading to a surge in communal cooking spaces, fast food delivery, and meal kit services. This is probably one of the more dystopian ones, and I've seen a lot of these in my time with Space 10 and IKEA, like huge building blocks. Some of them I saw in New York, they're built without a kitchen. And we're not talking about like a co-living apartment. It's just like a plain normal apartment, no kitchen. And obviously, like I would assume in particular here in Barcelona, it's like, how can you live like that? But obviously, it's not because they want to, it's because they cannot afford to live in apartments that are big enough to really have those large kitchens. So what do? You remove them. Then at the same time, in certain markets, it's It's easier and it's cheaper for families of low-income households to buy fast food than to actually buy groceries. And it's not only, I think 4 or 5 years ago, grocery spending versus eating and drinking establishments were turned. So actually, eating and drinking establishments had a higher revenue than groceries for the first time in history. And that is something that we will see change the way we look at home in a very different way again. And food is obviously dear to all of us. It's a sense of home. We've done a lot of research at Space 10 with food, probably one of the domains we work with the most. Most of it were more like how we can replace proteins in IKEA's food offer with alternatives to meat. So we did a lot of experimentation with like lab-grown meat and plant-based meat and insects and recipes and stuff like that. We also made a salad bar in London where the salad was grown inside the salad bar with 90% less water, and obviously that was in, I think, 16, so now vertical farming is a lot more mainstream. But these systems are obviously changing again, primarily of 3 reasons. One of them is affordability. Food is really, really expensive for a lot of families. But time is also a big essence. If you really struggle financially, you work a lot, and you just don't have the time to do all of these things, even though you could, if there's a cheaper alternative. And then on the flip side, people with a lot of money suddenly look at cooking as a luxury, right? Like slow cooking. I have a lot of money, so I spend a lot of time on making food. That's like a new movement, right? Like on TikTok and all those places, like you make food a whole day. And I love that, but obviously it's interesting that making food now is becoming like a sign of luxury for a lot of people because you want to show that you have time at hand, where before it was reversed. And then obviously food is also a major business. So there's so much money and so many industries that want to have a piece of that pie of food. Not just groceries, but like the whole shebang. They just want to be part of it because it's every day. So there's like revenue every single day, and it's like a lot of money that is being spent on food. So some of the shifts that we will see at home are, on one side, this whole new rise of delivery, not just delivery of groceries, but in particular delivery of ready meal kits and ready dishes. And this whole new rise of cloud kitchens that, I don't know if you've all studied it or heard about it, but basically like co-working spaces, but for chefs. So they buy in the tomatoes and the potatoes and all the ingredients at bulk, and then, if you want to make food and don't want to operate a restaurant, you can rent a space there, and then you can serve food to customers. And obviously this sounds more romantic than it is. In theory, it's also being called dark kitchens because some places, the conditions for making this food is far from good. But there is a promise and an interesting shift where everybody thought that groceries would be the thing we bought online, and suddenly actually we're skipping that line and people are just buying the meal straight away in the same amount of time instead. And from a hygiene point of view, obviously Uber and others will probably pride themselves of saying we have hygiene control on things, etc. But it will change the way and how often we use our kitchen. And as an example, the kitchen business is one of the biggest business lines of IKEA's business. So if people start to not have kitchens at home or buy things in kitchens differently, it's a major shift in a major business bottom line. But we also see other things like transparency in data. So Skisho and other devices now can be developed to just scan the ingredients that you're buying, and then you can track where they're from, what do they consist of, how much sugar do you have in it, how many calories, etc., etc. And you will start to know a lot more about what you eat and what you get into your body. And obviously, history has told us, like, the more information we have of things, the more also our behavior changes, both for better and worse. We have talked about slow cooking. I think the last one is these communal kitchens that I think and I hope will be a big thing. In particular, in a continent like with Europe, where we are aging and we are becoming more and more lonely in terms of how we build our homes. Like, we will not cook as long as we live alone, often, study shows. I don't know if any of you have any grandparents that lives alone, but I can see on my grandmother that she's not making as much food at home anymore after she lives alone than what she used to. And obviously that is extremely bad for the longevity of how long she's going to live and how sane she's going to be at this last journey of her life. And we're seeing a lot of new initiatives, not just for young people, but also for aging population that can meet around food. I've just seen a really exciting new co-living space in France that are for single mothers with families. So they are moving in now in these super cool housing units where they also share meals with their kids and families around food. And they were sold out like this. So there are both some technology and then there's something else. But like the typology of how you design the home around food will change quite dramatically. Then the next one is health and healthcare. Around 70% of smart homes could be equipped with AI-driven health monitoring systems that could reduce emergency hospital visits by around 30%. And this is a trend that I think is quite interesting, which is the hospital is moving into the home in many ways. In Copenhagen, it's quite popular now to give birth at home, so like that function is moving into the home again, and the hospital comes out with equipment and staff. It's not just because the family wants to, but it's also something now that's being encouraged because they don't have enough capacity at the hospital in certain months a year. But obviously, at Space 10, we have worked with it for quite a while, and in particular, aging care and the cost of care as a society is forcing us to rethink this whole system. So I'm not even going to talk about the States when it comes to this, because that's a fucking shit show when it comes to care. Sorry, my cursing, but it's like I cannot believe that system when it comes to healthcare in the US. It's so cruel towards people who don't have a lot. But let's just take Europe as an example. We also need to rethink how we look at care. We get older, all of us, and we can't afford as a society to maintain this standard. Even if we are super idealistic, like pragmatically, it will be very, very difficult to uphold. So we're going to see the home, and this is again a sign of now it's more in the high-end space. I think we'll see this trickle down into more democratic companies as well, but we'll see a home that acts as a caring home. We will see sleep being a very, very big monitoring service as well. Age Sleep is a good example of it, but there are a lot of startups now moving into how they can help you optimize sleep and how you can sleep better and when you have slept, and you can then track how that feels like as a person. Obviously, toilets probably going to be bigger in Japan still for a while than in Europe, but toilets has a huge new wave of innovation in front of them, where they can obviously digest and identify if you're being sick way before you're actually feeling anything. Can identify some of the most essential challenges when it comes to health and care, just by monitoring your piss and poop, to say it bluntly. Obviously, it's a little bit of a privacy issue, so it's going to be quite interesting to see which companies are moving into that space, but it will be a thing. But we'll also see that furniture starts to have another role. This is a table that we did some work with IKEA on, which is a table that also purifies the air in your living room. So it's not like a separate air purifier, it's just a table, but a table that also constantly cleans the air around you to make sure you breathe better air. And then you're seeing a lot of new hardware that's trying to help you elevate your activity and exercise at home, and a lot of mirrors now with computer vision who will help you identify changes, in particular in your skin, to see if you should actually call a doctor, or in this case, just help you exercise better. And on the other side, home will also be for some a place where I think we'll see a lot of physical interaction with healthcare system. So instead of you going to the hospital, we'll likely see a lot more the hospital coming to you. And what does that mean for an aging population? If suddenly the home needs to be a place that should support you for a lot longer, will we see that suddenly the medicine can be made at home, and we'll see a lot more of robotic initiatives, but we'll also see a whole new gig economy, I think, similar as what we have seen with Uber and Bolt and all those, but for a very different type of work, which is care work, and hopefully with better working conditions. But it's something that I think home will be a destination for. Almost done. Fabrication will be very, very exciting, and also in relation to home, around 25% of household goods could be made in local and regional microfactories, reducing global shipping carbon footprint by around 15%. Obviously, this is a primary shift that we are seeing, that we're moving away from globalism to a more regional approach. I don't think there's any CEO in any big company right now who's not trying to re-change their whole supply chain to become regional. I personally don't buy the whole local supply chain. I think it's beautiful vision. It's not that practical to make new factories in the cities. Now we finally got rid of them. But I think a regional approach to manufacturing is something we will see really, really grow. And obviously in Europe and in the States, the whole shipping routes and the whole now challenges with the ships and all that politics is really changing things for how we make things. And when we change things to be more local and regional, we will also change what we can make. So digital fabrication and customization will become a thing that we will do a lot more of. This is a home we designed at Space 10 some years ago. It's a home you can download online and make locally by using open source design and parametric design principles. But we will see that beyond the politics, new materials and new technology platforms will enable a lot more designers to make goods without necessarily having the full supply chain or the warehouse or the production facilities, because other companies will take care of that. We did one example of that, which was this collection where it was like built of 4 or 5 key pieces, almost like Lego. And then we built this small little algorithm that could help you design thousands of combinations and typologies by using very few types of items. So you could both kind of, from a cost point of view, have volume in terms of the components, but from a customization point of view, the customer could design the size and the height of the bed frames or the shelving systems to your needs and demands. And obviously, this is not as easy if all of these things need to be shipped from all across the world, but the flexibility of a regional design approach will change that. The last one I have is neighborhoods, and no, actually this one I'll skip. Mobility. The only thing I wanted to say with that is that we will likely see that where we live and where we build homes will change too. But to be honest, I think I'm just going to skip that. Because I thought this was the last one. Neighborhood. The last part is that we will see that people living in cities will see home very different than what we used to see home as. And in particular, the function of the home. What should a home be? We have this, I don't know, any of you have kids, but if they draw a home, they still draw like a box with a triangle on top and all the visualizations of a home. They have a living room and a dining room. But let's face it, most people's home is 1 room, 2 rooms that has to do everything. And we have done a lot of work around the home as the city as the home. We've done books and exhibitions and talks and all kinds of stuff on it. And what I think is interesting in this space is that we will really see that cities are forcing us to completely rethink the home, not just from an urban point of view and an affordability point of view, but luckily that's also forcing a new counterculture I'll end up with. So new homes, at least the ones I'm talking a lot with at the moment, they are getting a lot of asks from the municipalities of building these different typologies of homes that needs to support more than just what is inside the home. That could be social spaces, care spaces, retail spaces, but also more amenities that can be shared across the whole neighborhood block. And this will obviously, as a designer, be completely different from how you normally saw and designed the homes. We'll also see that playgrounds and other things will be something that is being put outside the home, and we will see that kitchen and stuff is also moving out. The last thing I want to say with that before I end is but I also luckily see a counterculture right now to urbanization. I don't know how many times I've heard 70% of the world's population is going to live in cities by 2050. It's like this thing, if you work in Trendland, it's almost imprinted in your mind. But obviously that shift is primarily driven by Africa and East Asia in terms of the actual number. And it's also just a number. But what we're seeing now is if you can't get a good home in the city, and you suddenly start to be able to work further out of the city, this counterculture of moving out of the city, I think will be very, very exciting to see. And that was my little point with mobility. In not 20 years, but maybe in 100 years, 120 years, we'll likely have drones and autonomous vehicles that will enable us to live places where there's no roads or electricity grids or internet connections, because things will be disconnected from a centralized grid. And will that mean that we will live in new places that are more remote than what it was before? That's a lot of a lot. So I guess I'll wrap up now so we can all get something to drink and breathe a little bit again. I warned you I would bombard you with my mind, and it's a very messy place. But hopefully you can see some patterns in this chaos. And it's not necessarily one idea. It's the fact that home will very much be a center of attention for many industries. And that is what is exciting about design. It's to choose domains where a lot of chaos and friction happens, because it's often from that new, exciting, meaningful things, they come out of it. And if I should bring 3 learnings from my thinking into today's keynote, it would be that you should forget technology and all these trends and all these products and try to see whether you can be part of making homes that can enable physical and mental well-being, homes that can actively help combat the climate crisis, and homes that could provide access and belonging for all. Because the new home, it is the most important place in the world. Thank you.
So we have 10 minutes for questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and Maria will hand you a mic. Over there.
Hi. I was wondering what you would say to a bunch of people in an auditorium who are interested in what you do, but don't have a partner like IKEA backing them economically.
That's a good question. I don't have a partner anymore like IKEA, so I'm starting to think about what to do. I mean, I think at the end, it depends on what you want, because there's many ways to succeed. You can succeed to be more activistic and artistic, and if that's the direction of choice, I would focus a lot more on the message and on the storytelling around your work and getting that out, and from that you will get more work. Or you can be more pragmatic, and then I would choose to either seek jobs or to seek clients that are within spaces that will grow going forward. So the only thing I would avoid is to seek jobs or seek clients in failing industries, because the reactive state that leaders will be in those will not be encouraging for new big ideas.
Hi. Thank you for the talk. I mean, it had a valuable insight in terms of what we perceive home is and can be in the future. But I would also like to understand, how do you have this aspect of the political and the capitalistic approach when we have in terms of housing and the way we define dwellings for human beings, because that's an important point, the way history has seen it to happen.
Yeah, it's sometimes, at least for me, overwhelming when you start to think about it at a global scale. Like with Space 10, we had to operate in many markets, and our team were from, like, I think 16 different nations, from China and India and the States, and we had many countries in Europe. And when we had discussions around the home, obviously the politics and the restrictions from a political side, they were often the barriers of a lot of the great ideas and often the cause of a lot of the challenges. So my advice would be to be a pragmatic idealist and choose some sort of region that you would then want to understand and can fight those rules more in depth. I think a mistake we did was to try to be relevant and cover too many territories, and then you can't really scratch the surface enough. So if you, for example, are based in Europe and you work here, like, understand what is the EU politics on some of the matters that you hold dear or that you work within, and try to go a little bit more in depth from a regional point of view, where I think the ones who get caught in the global politics and the global systems, they can end up being paralyzed by the overwhelming factors of it. When it comes to the whole issue with capitalism and money, I could go on for a long time. I'm definitely on the very left side of the spectrum for that discussion, but I think it's probably too big of an issue for me to be able to answer in a short answer, to be very honest. But I've personally chosen not to fight that battle head on. Some would be calling me a quitter and give up. I have a lot of friends who say that you cannot do that, but I think, you can only do so much as one human, and you also have a lot of things you want to do to change in your close sphere with family and friends. So I think the best we can do is all to try to change things for the better, but not necessarily radical. You can change things in smaller scales and larger movements. It will happen. It might not happen as fast as you want it to, but sometimes the flip side is frustration, and that is not necessarily constructive in the design discipline. I don't know if that will answer your question, but that's my attempt.
Hello. Hi. Thank you very much for the talk. Very inspiring, and it's a good chance to think about future and futurizing in your mind. I was just curious what happened to Space 10, and maybe if you could share a few lessons that you've learned with Space 10, in maybe as something you could consider as failures, but in fact something you've learned.
Yeah, so I think it's important to say Space 10 was never built to last from the beginning. We knew that there would be an expiration date on Space 10, not in our contract, but more like it was not that we thought this is something we're going to do till we are 70. Like we knew that at some point we would either personally move on, or maybe what we did would be successful and then irrelevant, or unsuccessful and then irrelevant. And all of us who started it are, I would say, entrepreneurs by heart in many ways. So we also like this idea of not necessarily doing things forever. I met a friend's kid who said, because we talked about it, and he said, it's like building a sandcastle. It's the most fun part is when you build it and then you destroy it. And I think no matter what, that was the plan. We just didn't know when. And then after almost 10 years, a lot of thoughts starts to pop up personally in the group, in the team, but also in the world. We had, I think, succeeded with our original objectives that we set out to reach, and we're in the midst of defining a new journey for the next 10 years. There was just a lot of changes, both with IKEA in the group of the founders, and then we had the opportunity to actually maybe stop it rather than continuing it as a compromise of what we had intended. We had discussions around opening it up for new clients, but we just felt that it was not what we did it for. We had some offers around selling it, but we were afraid that they would screw up what we had built. So at the end, we actually just said maybe we should just call it a quit. Yeah, it was a difficult decision, but we had a good deal that also meant we could take care of our team, and it feels very liberating now. So I think it was the right decision. I think sometimes it's good to end something to make room for new things, even though human nature doesn't really intuitively make that a thing that you would consider. But most good things in life also has an ending. So yeah, it was a difficult decision, but also I think the right one. Yeah, in hindsight. And maybe just to add, we could have continued also with IKEA. It was not some secret in the back that we don't have. It was really a proactive decision to do it. Then it was also a good story that it was almost 10 years. So, we are storytellers.
Here, sorry.
Hi.
Thank you for your talk. I'm not a designer myself. I worked in the scientific field in health materials inspired by nature. And you used a word in the beginning of your talk that you didn't mention more, which was the non-human. So I was wondering whether you could deepen a little bit more on how we can inspire and cohabit with the non-human. And also, for example, learning from different scientific fields in terms of materials and materials based in nature. And I don't know, maybe something on your futuristic idea. Thank you.
I actually think it was Andreas who said non-human. If I know him correctly, it's a term I hear often say. But I can speak into like how we can use nature and other inputs than just us human beings in part of the design process. And I personally, and we have communicated that quite vocally at Space 10, believe that it's time to move away from human-centered design, and putting humans in the middle of everything has not really always gone according to plan. And that doesn't mean that humans are not important in equation, but like looking at humans as an element in a larger ecosystem will likely be necessary if we should design solutions that are more sustainable going forward. But I also think we already have really interesting examples where disciplines like biomimicry or other types of design practices actually can do things that that is far superior than what we could do as humans. Actually, a lot of AI work is also being done by analyzing a lot of patterns and how nature runs. And I met one of the designers behind Uber many years ago, who apparently they also have studied like movements of ants to see how they could optimize the fleet of these like major platforms of ride-hailing services. So there's a lot of opportunity in using nature, but it's unfortunately not something I'm personally an expert in. So I would just encourage you to explore it further, because I think there's a lot to be uncovered in that field. But I don't have any advice for you for how to do it personally.
Hi, thank you so much. I wanted to kind of connect with that and also ask you about the 100 years or 120 years for flying cars, drones, and these kind of isolated cities without roads. Why do you see them so far? What's the blocker?
I just think we have talked about self-driving cars for 100 years and they're still not really here at scale. So I think it's just a hunch that some of these things, they will take a little longer. Maybe not from a technical point of view, but from a policy point of view and from a behavioral point of view. Obviously, self-driving cars we are seeing to some extent today, but it's in certain areas of the world with quite simple roads and good quality, and I don't know, driving around in a small village in Italy or the middle of Delhi. I don't know. I think there's some human factors still around the complexity of it. With drones, I think you're seeing now a lot of money being put into ventures within that space, and I personally find it very, very interesting, this idea that like potentially we can have transportation that is not reliant on roads, because roads are basically what defines how we transport ourselves today. And what will that mean when suddenly we can move places without necessarily preparing for moving there first? So there's a lot of thinking around what that would mean at scale, in the same way as how the car changed how we lived our lives. But I can only imagine what it will be, and I haven't seen any signs that it will come within the next 10 years at scale. So speaking of the S-curves, I think we're still in the frenzies. But I've been wrong many times the last 10 years. So that's also why I said, don't take my words for granted today. It might be that you are proving me wrong next time we meet.
If I can, I think that's
Hi. I found pretty interesting how you're talking about the local fabrication and local solutions. It reminded me of this article that talk about architectural studios selling European solutions for urbanizations to Latin America, for example. They were like, if you buy this, you can transform Santo Domingo into Barcelona, you know? And obviously that doesn't work because Santo Domingo doesn't have these same problems as Barcelona. Is there any way of us to get ahead of like these commercializations of global problems? Because I think Santo Domingo, when they buy this program, they were kind of like, how do you say estafado? See, like they were sell something that they didn't need. Is there any way of like getting ahead to this like selling process?
I'm not sure I exactly know what you mean, but could you elaborate?
So, I don't know how to phrase it. Maybe if we can try to have like mechanisms to find solutions instead of being sold, how can we get ahead of like this pitching and this? Because I found like I don't know, like a salesman, like a conman, for example. I don't know if Latin America has any type of mechanisms so we could like not spend so much money on those solutions that doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, like if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. So you know, it is obviously it's something that is still to be solved in terms of making it available. I think when it comes to, for example, local fabrication, it's like a chicken and the egg. On one side, it's like the manufacturing and the fabrication side of it, and the other side, it's the design and the demand from customers. And what we tried, at least with the project I showed you, were to say, rather than trying to make it 100% customizable with 3D printers and all that, it's very expensive and it's very difficult to communicate. Can we as designers make something that is fairly easy to manufacture at a low price at scale, but where the design changes in terms of the system? And that was a little bit our theory around it, but I'm not exactly sure how to answer, to be honest.
Me neither. Thank you.
Okay, a big applause for Kaave. Thank you. And thank you all for coming. Two announcements. One is the next Elisava Master Talk. It will be on February 14th, so check the Elisava website, Instagram, I guess, to learn about the details. And from the Mastering Design for Responsible AI, we are announcing today that we are also doing a series of open talks, so also free at Elisava. The theme is Critical Futures. So if you are interested in AI, in particular responsible AI, its relation with media, with design, in a state of climate emergency, you are super welcome. We will be featuring faculty coming from very different places. So just go to the website of Elisava, the agenda. You will find more details there, and we will be announcing in the upcoming weeks. The first one is on January 30. But yeah, all the details are in the website, in the agenda. And that's it, right? Thank you. Muchas gracias por todo.